Hello again, this is Jonathan Miller with the Hometown Historian. I am here at Hill Lutheran Church in Cleona, Pennsylvania. It's just north of Cleona, Pennsylvania. This church is actually started in 1733. The building that you see here, it goes to right over here where, let me see if I can get my finger in here, actually do it on purpose. Right around where my thumb is there, you'll see this stone foundation. This part of the building was, I believe, looking at the research and stuff like that, about 1837 was when this part of the building was actually built. The original structure, because the church was started in 1733, it was actually started by that John Casper Stover. I had done the video on Beanogle Church and Cemetery, which was started in 1745. The John Casper Stover actually started this one first. He was a gentleman who was born over in Germany, came over here to Philadelphia, and became an ordained minister for the Lutheran Church, and then went around to different German immigrant communities, especially the Lutheran, which had a large group of Lutherans in them, and he'd start these churches. He had started this one in 1733. Beanogle was started in 1745, and then the other church I've seen that he was the founder of as well was Sadison Lutheran Church in Greenpoint, Pennsylvania, which was my hometown. And that church is, I believe, it was 1752, and actually the Moravians played a major part as well, which is another major part of the German community, had started that church as well over there. Now this church, the original structure was actually a four-sided log structure with no roof, which is sort of weird, but a lot of these churches, like this one, I had done a video on Bethel Moravian Cemetery. The Bethel Moravian Church, that was also a pretty prominent structure, so they were used as forts, even though they never, in most cases, they didn't use fort names for those places. They were used for the local community as a place of sanctuary and safety. And this Mr. Stover, John Casper Stover, which right there is his monument and his grave marker, he was apparently quite the obstinate individual, and he was also viewed with controversy, because one of the things that he did, which was sort of unique, this church actually was a shared facility for 100 and a little over 100, maybe 160 years, a little more than that. And we're going to go up the road 500 yards north is the Hill Reformed Church. And Reformed Church, I believe, are Calvinists, and they actually joined forces and both used this facility for a very, very long time. And obviously before that was the log structure that they used as well. But he was known, apparently Sadison's was used by both the Moravians and the Lutherans. So that wasn't necessarily the most popular thing back then. They sort of didn't think that you should mix the denominations. But he saw it as this was a ministry, it was about helping people, and he dedicated well over 50 years of his life. And this is the actual church, not this building here, but the original log structure, where he died in the middle of a confirmation service in 1779. He just said, they say he just collapsed, whether it was heart attack, stroke, or an aneurysm. He passed away in the middle of service, and that was what he had dedicated his life to. So I guess in a way it was fitting. And he was a beloved individual, is really considered to be one of the founding figures of the Lutheran Church here in the United States. The more I learn about this man, the more intriguing he is. Just really, really extraordinary guy. Another cool fact, like, he originally had, when he moved from Philadelphia, he moved to New Holland, Pennsylvania, which is in Lancaster County. And his home is an original log structure, which is not real pretty structure now, but it still exists, and it's on the National Registry for Historic Buildings and Places. So at some point I'd like to go visit that as well. But he went all over the place. There's a church down in York that he used to visit for about 10 years, and they said he went as far south as Virginia. Just preaching the gospel and reaching out to people and ministering. To just show like how extraordinary his service was, he had in his own record book over 2,000 baptisms recorded and over 1,200 weddings, which is extraordinary, like really extraordinary. And they said it was probably quite a bit more than that, because a lot of times you would put them in the church registry, which unfortunately a lot of those don't exist anymore, but they assume that he probably had quite a few more. So this church here, one of the unique things about this cemetery is there are a lot of Heilmans. The Heilman family was very prominent in this church and in this area. There's actually a small town between Ebenezer and where I live called Heilmandale. They're a very prominent family, have an extraordinary history, and it's, you see sometimes like over in Beanoggles, there's an Early family, which when I go and do the video for the upper cemetery, I actually want to talk about the Early family a little bit, because they have a connection with one of our presidents. From that family, the one daughter married into another family. They moved out to Kansas, and down the road came one of our presidents and one of our greatest generals. So it was a pretty cool connection there. But that family, apparently, my friend Ralph Watts had his mother and I guess his grandmother during World War II. The caretaker had to go off the war, so his grandmother and mother took care of the church grounds. And he had said, like, even when he was going back there for till he was like 5, I think in the 60s, he had said that the Early family was still pretty prominent there, and I guess is till this day they still are very prominent. So you always had some of those families like through generation after generation after generation. And here, the Heilman family, how many generations? I know there's a tombstone down that direction that says 6th generation. So there's actually the 1st generation here. And I also want to quick show a stone. On a lot of German buildings, sometimes they would put these stones that sort of talked about this church, and it had it in German. I'm going to see if I can quick, because I didn't know what it meant, but I do now, because I did a little bit more research. Let's see if we can zoom in there. It says like Berg Kirche, which is actually Hill Church, is what that stands for in German. The rest, I have no clue. But the Heilmans, one of the first Heilmans that came over here from Germany, we came from the same area as John Caspar Stover. He was actually what's called the Bergmeister, which is the building master. So he was actually the architect of the original log structure. I don't know if he was, another Heilman was the building master for this building or not, but it's very similar in the styling as the Beanoggle church. A little bigger. Now, Beanoggles also is very unique. I think it's the only church in the area that has, I think it's called a wine table and a sounding board. So it means the pastor's pulpit is actually at the very center of the church. It's very unique, and they still have, like, from 1745, from their founding, they have the original silver cups that they do some of the communion and things of that nature. So we're going to quick go over here to John Caspar Stover's grave marker. And this is quite an extraordinary man. He's a guy who's definitely worth looking up, and I'd like to do more on him, especially when I go to his house and maybe find out a little more information. I'm sure there's other churches that he founded, but you know, it was pretty cool. So it says Stover there, and it says erected to the memory of John Caspar Stover, the first German Lutheran minister ordained in America. So he was the very first German Lutheran minister ordained in America. That's pretty cool. But born in the Lower Palatinate, which is in Germany, and then it was probably Prussia, but December 21st, 1707, arrived in America September 11th, 1728, pastor of the Lutheran congregation of the Hill Church for 46 years, died May 13th, 1779, age 71 years, 4 months, 22 days. The other thing that's cool about this stone is they then have, which I'm going to go over to this side because this is where it starts, but it actually has listed the following Lutheran pastors have served the Hill Evangelical Lutheran congregation in search of John Caspar Stover, 1733 to 1779, and it goes through all these different individuals. It actually goes around the stone here. It's pretty impressive. But this place is the oldest Lutheran church in Lebanon County, Pennsylvania, 1733. So you think about this place is coming up on 300 years old. I mean, it's impressive, the amount of history. And I know we constantly say, like Cliff and I both talk about, you know, every single one of these people here had a story, and it's raining. Grr. I was out here the other day. I'm going to quick go underneath this tree. Hopefully this is just a passing shower. I don't want to get completely soaked. But which actually have two cool stones here, which is actually, I guess, the building meister or building master. This one is Henry Collinger. He was born 1709. Forget where he said he passed away. Almost looks like 1768 down there. He was one of the founding elders in the church. You can see how hard it's raining. Thankfully there's this big tree here, so I'm not getting too soaking wet. But John Adam Heilman, this is the guy, he's the original, I believe, the building master of the original structure. And like I said, it was a unique structure because there was no ceiling or roof on it for quite a while. Eventually they did put a roof on, and then I think it was like 1835 or so, the structure was getting into pretty bad shape, and they decided that it was time. Sheesh. Oh, the trees help me only so much. But get underneath another tree. But they eventually decided it was time to build another church because it had just gotten into such bad state of affairs and structurally wasn't sound anymore. So then they built the current structure that's here along where this stone foundation is. That's all the 1837 building. There's actually a stone on the front of the building that says 1933, which I remember looking at that the first time. I was like, wow, that seems like this building seems a lot older than that. But that's actually for the bicentennial of the church. Hopefully this comes through here pretty quick and stops because I'm getting wet. Not that I don't enjoy that, and I also don't want to get struck by lightning. This sort of came out of nowhere. We have the Hurricane Henry right now. I guess this is some of the waves, because we had last night some pretty solid rain came through. I guess it was supposed to have landed in Long Island or New York region there, but we got hit reasonably hard. Not really a whole lot of wind, but quite a bit of rain. And I guess this is one of the rainstorms that's coming through. They had said about the potential of having some thunderstorms coming through, some heavy rain, and I happened to, they even thought about when I come out here, I was like, is this a good idea or not? And well, it's a good idea. It's unique. It's a fun experience. And some good news, like I had not been able to put some videos out for a little bit because I had to be off my feet for about 7 days. And then I also had backlogged smaller jobs, and then had to work a little bit more than I was originally planning on. So I wasn't able to get out and film here for a little bit. So that's the reason behind not being able to get out and film. I actually had to get my big toe checked out as well because there were some issues with that, which thankfully is just some swelling, some fluid retention. So they're putting me on a water pill and then changing one of my blood pressure medications because that can promote swelling. So thankfully I was getting nervous because it is ugly. Yeah, I've joked about not being a foot model. I never was going to be a foot model, but that was starting to terrify me a little bit because I think one of my biggest fears is just I don't want to go back and have to get another surgery, get something else removed. Yeah, not quite sure what I'm going to do here because this just came out of nowhere and there's a little bit of thunder, so I might wind up pausing this and then starting up again because there's a lot of cool stones here. There's actually one with a really cool skull and crossbones, which is something you'll see in the older like German cemeteries, which that would be what this is. It's not quite as awesome. There's one in Berks County. It might actually be Lebanon County now I think about it. It's right on the border, but it's right down from Myerstown, and that has quite a bit of them. Like they're really sort of eerie looking, but it was something that they did back then. There's a lot of Revolutionary War vets buried here. Some pretty cool and unique stones, but I am going to pause this for right now, and then I am going to start up again once this rain slows down, because right now I am getting drenched. And as enjoyable as it is taking a second shower, doing it with your clothes on isn't the best idea. So I will be back in a little bit. Thanks, everybody. We're starting up again. It has stopped raining. Yeah, I am definitely wet though. I stayed out just a little bit too long. It started getting a lot harder than I thought it was going to be there for a bit, so I'm wet, but clean. It was a beautiful rainstorm. At least I think it's done rain now. It's starting to drip again. But anyway, so we're going to go down over at this side of the cemetery. We're going to go through reasonably quick. I'm going to try to get a couple of these, but this is, I mean, it's an older cemetery. A lot of the stuff is very hard to read. A lot of these stones like this, they're in German, so I have no idea what they say. It's like that stone there up on the church. There's a bunch of German, and then I did a little more research, and they talk about the Berg, whatever that starts with a K, that stands for Hill Church. And it's one thing that's sort of odd with this cemetery as well, is that there's a lot of intermixing of, like, you have like the newer stones will be in amongst like some of these older stones. So here's one of these things too, where you have the headstone and then you have the footstone. And that's, once again, that's another one. It's in German. Very cool, like almost like calligraphy type writing. I see 1737 on there. They have a number of these stones. Here's the one with the skull and crossbones. It's really, really just sort of neat. See that there? But once again, this is German. And there's another one, a headstone, footstone. That's a Revolutionary War vet there. That's one you can't really read. But there's a number of these areas where they sort of have, in the older cemeteries, they'll have where it'll be stone around, like in a rectangle or a square, and a lot of them are like they're family plots. And there's a Samuel K. Stover. I wonder if he was related to that's the Philippine insurrection, so I would assume that that's Spanish-American War. There's another, there's a Lizzie Stover. And a lot of these, like, once again, these are all written in German. There's a lot of Stovers right here, I'm noticing. This is something I didn't notice the last time, but just the ornate and really beautiful writing. There's 1777 and died in 1846. Once again, every single one of these people had a story. You could write books probably about their lives, and you know, it's a shame that you don't know everything about these people. One thing that's neat with the Heilman family, I guess one of the earliest members of the Heilman family, he actually started recording their history, so that was pretty neat. This is pretty neat. So that actually, over there, that's a monument to him. This is where he's actually buried. I think on the other side, the markers are in German, so you can't read it, but it says, "Here rests Maria Catherine, wife of John Caspar Stover, evangelical Lutheran preacher. She was born May 14th, 1715 in Palatinate. Her parents were Christian Merkling and wife Maria Catherine. She died in 1795 at the age of, looks like almost, well, she's been, what, 80 years old. Yeah, 4 months, 3 weeks. And then here rests asleep in his Redeemer, John Caspar Stover, first evangelical Lutheran preacher in Pennsylvania, was born in the lower Palatinate, 1707. He begot with his wife Maria Catherine H. children, or 11 children, 4 of whom preceded him into eternity. And then he died 1779. He was 71. So let's look at the other side. I didn't look at the back of these the last time. So it's cool, like you go back another time and you see all the stuff that you missed. Yeah, this is it's a pretty cool. It's like a cherub or an angel. But the spelling looks Johann. Yeah, it's just the spelling's different, but that's pretty neat that they were able to preserve these in the brick here. But that's okay. That's pretty cool. We actually found that wasn't his gravesite. That was just a monument to him. So, but there's a Heilman, and that's all the newer stones. But there's an example of, you know, these different areas where it's just like a family plot, and it's just Heilmans. I think they said there's 140 or 142 people with links to the Heilman family in some form that are buried here in this cemetery. So that's pretty unique. It's just that many people. So you just think about the history of a family, excuse me, that is just throughout here, like generation after generation after generation of a family that's buried here. This is really, really quite neat. And this amount of Revolutionary War vets here as well is just extraordinary. A lot of people here that served our country, and it's why we're where we're at today. The freedoms that we possess, and they stood up to tyranny. Yeah, this is a really neat cemetery. There's another one further up the road, but that's all newer stones. This one's cool. It almost has like a sunflower there on the tomb, and a little bit smaller, right? Some of these stones are really, really unique. But you see, like a lot of these stones, like the Revolutionary War period, will have sort of that crown on the top. It's one of those things that you sort of, as you do this more and more, you learn, okay, these stones were very popular at this time, these monuments at another time, and all that. But yeah, I really do like coming to these places. There's just so much history that's here, and it's just, you wish you knew more about these people, and you know, so much is just lost to time. And but yeah, it's every single one of these people. It's just so many Revolutionary War vets. This is really, really neat. There's a little bit larger, almost looks like Elizabeth or something. There, it's slightly larger writing. But this church has a lot of history, a really, really neat place. I do want to go up to that other church, the Reformed Church. I believe they shared facilities here till 1903 when they built the Hill Reformed Church out of red sandstone. Really pretty church. I mean, it's, you know, almost 120 years old. So really, really pretty architecture to it. And I always like the buildings with the red sandstone. They just have such a neat look to them. But you can see how, like, they have the newer stones, and then some of these older stones, like right here, just sort of everything's just sort of intermingled. Normally you just sort of follow, like, the closer to the church are the oldest stones, and then as you go out further is when the newer and newer stones have. But this is sort of mixed together. But I think part of that as well might be that this is a churchyard that was actually shared by not only this church, the Lutheran church, but also the Reformed church. So you have that might play into it. I know, like, the Moravians, for instance, they always had their stones flat on the ground because the way they viewed death is that everybody was the same in death. So that's sort of how they did that. I don't think they have anything like that over at Sadison's, but I always sort of thought from what I had read and researched that John Caspar Stover started that church that was purely Lutheran, but apparently the Moravians also played a role in that as well. But that was part of the reason that he was so controversial, is he didn't do anything wrong, at least from what I've researched, but I guess it just rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But it says something about his character as well, and like how he really, we got to work together, that these churches work together, and apparently they still did a lot of stuff together to 1919 and still have a good relationship. Now the Reformed Church is now United Church of Christ, but to just have a relationship that long between these churches, these two denominations, when that wasn't very common, says a little bit about, you know, the foundation that he started. And that's you know, that's a legacy that's worth having. Once again, I might be wrong about that, but that's the only thing that I've read. You know, normally if somebody has something really controversial, like Cliff just did a thing on the Paxton boys and the pastor, I think John Elder was his name, and he was very controversial because of the role he played in sort of amping people up to go after the Indians. So there's nothing that I've seen that's like that. He was apparently a very beloved individual, and was the type of individual that encouraged people to work together. So there's sort of a unique stone. It's a Heilman there. There's just so many of these really, really old stones. Just really quite neat. We'll get over to that side of the cemetery near the road last. I didn't get over to this section the last time I tried to make a video here, and I was having trouble with my battery, and just a few other issues with just the phone not wanting to coordinate with me. It was being a stinker, and I finally got to the point where I just gave up, and I was glad I was able to come, despite getting soaking wet. I'm glad I was able to come back here, find a few extra things that I didn't find the last time, and pretty neat. There's sort of a cool stone. Has a hand with the finger pointing up. Susanna, I think it's Metzer. There's just, I said, so much history here. It'd be nice to know more. I want to do more research on the Heilman family and maybe do some, because the Heilman Dale is actually reasonably close to where I live, and it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more about that family, because they pretty prominent, and certainly not just in this church but in the community in general. I want to check out this marker here just because it seems to be by itself a little bit, and it's just a large standing stone. Sometimes you find, you know, this person was the founder or something or whatever. I mean, maybe it has nothing on it, but you never know. Like I said, I didn't come down here the last time because I just didn't make it down this far. Let's see what this says. Looks like Gardner, Thrall, Sailor, 1906 or 1966. There's another sailor and a bunch, so it's just sailor family. One individual served in World War II. This is unique. It's just sort of standing here alone, but this is Hill Lutheran Church's cemetery and the church itself. It's a really pretty church. There's always like, it sort of has really cool silhouette. Always. Here's one. I like these. These are like the military markers, like they'd have at the. My dad's buried in Indiantown Gap. Now his are flat on the ground, but that's what these look like. They probably were originally at a military cemetery and then moved them here. Donald E. Jarrett, World War II. I'm assuming that was his wife, Esther M. Jarrett. And it's like every single one of the veterans, the families, thank you for your service. You know, so many of these individuals, they gave so much, and we wouldn't have the freedoms that we have today if it wasn't for these individuals. That's another thing. Like it's a reminder when you come to these places as well, especially when you know, you see like so many like Revolutionary War I didn't really see a whole lot of Civil War vets here, but definitely a lot of World War or Revolutionary War and World War II vets. Another one of these is sort of unique in the ground. Yes, these guys World War II vet. I sort of wonder if those were ones that were in a military cemetery at some point and then they got reburied here. But yeah, it's you just wonder. You go through, that's a pretty cool stone there. It's a little unique, different coloration and stuff like that. Or in 1836, Mary J. Karch, November 12, 1899, passed away. Yeah, these places are serene and truly places to remember. And this is another one where there's a number of these stones, like one, not a whole lot of them, but there's one row will be turned around and the opposite direction, which maybe that was just a mistake. Maybe there's a reason for it. I have to do more research on that because I don't know enough yet about a lot of these cemeteries, like the different features and why they did certain things certain ways. But you see certain things and you just sort of wonder. Sort of like this on the back of this stone, this monument where it says, "I am the resurrection and the life." It's a really pretty stone, pretty monument. Yeah. And it's a reminder, it certainly is a reminder that, you know, our lives are finite. And, you know, hopefully we're leaving this world a better place than we found it, and make a difference and have a legacy. And there's another look, one last look at the church. So we're gonna run up that way. I'm gonna quick take some pictures and a little bit of video of it. It was built in 1903, and that's the Hill Reformed Church, which they had decided finally in like 1903 they sort of wanted to have their own facility. It wasn't a breakup or anything like that. It was just something that they wanted, and they finally were at a point where they could do that. But just to know that those churches worked together for like 170 years is pretty impressive. So there's the Miller Mobile, still alive and purring. I had a tire blowout this morning when I was called to my doctor's appointment. It was a blast. But the Wandering Woodsman came and picked me up and took me out to get 2 new tires, and good times. So, all right, we'll see you in a little bit up there at Hill Reformed Church. All right, we're here at the top of the hill. This is Hill United Church of Christ, but back then it was known as the Hill Reformed Church. And this road here is called Hill Church Road. You can see it right over there. But it's just a really, really pretty, cool looking old structure. It's the red sandstone. It's really, really neat. I'm going to try to go across the street to get a better look at it and get a couple pictures that I can post. But just a really, like I said, it's a really pretty church. So, sorry about the traffic noise. I'm right here on a road. It gets pretty busy. But like there, it says 1903. And it has the original stained glass above the door where it says Hill Reformed Church. And I think it's cool too because it has a lot of that stained glass, which I'm going to have fun getting across the street here because people do not stop. This place is notorious. And there's the thing that says Hill Lutheran Church, which is right down the road. I believe this too is the campgrounds is for the United Church of Christ. So it's probably the land was donated at some point and allowed for, here it is, I said it's 500 yards north up the road from the original church, and they decided like 1901, 1902 that they were going to build their own church. And this is the church that they built, the Calvinists or the Reformed Church. And they still retained a really quite a good relationship through 1919 that they still got together. But they eventually, wanted to separate and have their own church, and it's probably part of that as the denominations got behind that as well, because sharing facilities is sort of frowned upon in a lot of ways. So get across here and hopefully we don't get hit, because people don't like to stop. But anyways, I wanted to show this church just quick. It's got some pretty stained glass. But this is the Hill Reformed Church, which is the other congregation that shared the Hill Lutheran facility. So I am going to head on out, and this will be it for this video. So we will see you on our next adventure, and we'll see you about town. Thanks, everybody.